In 1966, a Monsanto scientist dunked a caged fish into Snow Creek in Anniston, Alabama. It was dead in 10 seconds. He wrote it down. His bosses read the report, and then they buried it for 35 years. 20,000 people lived downstream. None of them knew, so why has no one ever told you this? Monsanto was America's chemical company. The name was on your lawn, on the fields feeding your family. Monsanto gave the world Roundup, Saccharin, and the seeds that built industrial agriculture. They ran full-page ads about feeding a growing planet. Clean, scientific, necessary. Forbes celebrated their innovation. Governors shook their hands. The company that kept America's crops alive, that was the story, that was the brand. A 100-year-old institution built on trust and progress. Except the files they never published told a very different story. PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. Industrial chemicals used in electrical equipment, manufactured at a single Monsanto plant in Anniston, Alabama, starting in 1929. They don't break down. They accumulate in fat tissue, in fish, in soil, in blood. Monsanto knew this as early as the 1930s. Internal studies confirmed toxicity in animals. By 1955, their own scientists had evidence linking PCBs to liver damage. But PCBs were a $22 million annual product line. So what Monsanto did next wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. They kept dumping chemical waste directly into Snow Creek, which ran through Anniston's west side, the black side of a segregated Alabama town. Open-pit landfills overflowing with PCB sludge sat next to the plant, leaching into groundwater. And when their own 1966 fish study confirmed the water was lethally toxic, a senior Monsanto official wrote the instruction that defined the next 3 decades. Do not alarm the community. They didn't just stay quiet. They managed the story. When state regulators came asking about contamination in the 1970s, Monsanto provided its own data they selected. When independent researchers flagged elevated PCB levels in Anniston residents in the 1980s, the company challenged the methodology. They had lawyers. They had lobbyists. They had the kind of influence that meant a small Alabama town didn't get an independent audit for decades. The Environmental Protection Agency had PCBs on their radar. Congress debated, but Monsanto's legal team moved faster than any regulatory body. By the time the EPA formally banned PCB production in 1979, Monsanto had already stopped making them, not because of ethics, because the liability math had finally shifted. But here's the part they really didn't want out. When lawyers finally got Monsanto's internal documents into court in the late 1990s, the files showed something that stopped the courtroom cold. Executives had been receiving regular contamination updates for decades. One document from 1970 read, "There is little probability that any product will be found safe." They knew the science. They wrote the science. And they paid people to sit on it. The blood testing, when it finally happened, was catastrophic. Anniston residents, many of whom had grown up playing in Snow Creek, eating fish from the creek as children, had PCB levels in their blood hundreds of times above what the CDC considered safe. Children had developmental damage. Cancer rates in the town were measurably elevated. The soil in parts of the west side was so contaminated it had to be excavated and physically hauled away. And the company that caused it? In 2003, what remained of Monsanto, through a spin-off called Solutia, settled with 20,000 Anniston residents for $700 million. The executives who wrote those memos were retired with full pensions. The company paid. The people paid. The executives went home. No criminal charges, not one. The legal theory that protected Monsanto was the same one that has shielded chemical companies for a century. Corporate liability stops at the civil level if you settle before a verdict. $700 million sounds large until you do the arithmetic. It works out to approximately $35,000 per person for a lifetime of exposure. And Monsanto's parent company, Pharmacia, had already spun the chemical liabilities off into Solutia before the settlement hit, which meant the agricultural giant that went on to become the most powerful seed company on Earth walked away structurally clean. Bayer acquired Monsanto in 2018 for $63 billion. In 2020, Bayer settled Roundup cancer claims for $11 billion. The pattern held: settle, spin, continue. The regulators who should have acted earlier cited resource constraints. The officials who knew said they lacked sufficient evidence. The system worked exactly as designed. Anniston is still there. The cleanup took years and wasn't total. The fish are back in parts of Snow Creek, some parts, and Monsanto's products, reformulated, rebranded, now under Bayer's name, are still on shelves, still on fields, still feeding the planet. The memos are public record now. You can read them. The scientists who wrote the original warnings are gone. The executives who buried the reports are gone. And the question that Anniston never got answered is the same question no one in the industry has ever been forced to answer. If you knew and you buried it and nothing happened to you, what exactly is the reason to stop?